Cool. I'm recording now, so I'll shoot you a link or put it on YouTube or something for you. Um, I'm apparently recording to the Zoom cloud, which I've never done before, so we'll see how this works. But yeah, so just to reiterate what we've been through real quick, set up a minimum key and value to compare against as we iterate through the hash. Set it equal to nil initially so that if there is no hash passed in, when this iterator is skipped, we're still returning nil, which is one of our tests that we need to handle for one of our cases. So yeah, so now we want to say, okay, we've got our first pass. So we have Blake and 10. If we're looking at this second test here, or I guess the seventh test technically, but this second test it actually passes a hash. So now min key is Blake and min value. Let's see if we can look at this. Maybe this will work. Sweet, yeah. So min key should still be nil, min value is still nil. And we have our key and our value. So the next time through, we hit it again, but this time our min key is Blake, our min value is 500. We have a new key, Ashley, and a new value of 2. So right now, nothing will come of this because we don't have anything in our else, but that's working the way we want it to. Comment this out for now. All right, so now let's compare. So actually, I think, or else if, because we have another comparison we want to do. So else if, what are we looking for again? The key. So we want to compare the values. So if value is less than min value. So if the value of the next iteration is less than the minimum value, then we want to update these. So we're doing this again. Not very dry, kind of verbose, can be refactored down, but this should be doing what we want. So let's see. Our spec. Oh, we didn't hit the pry. I want to look at it first. It does work though. Okay. So we know what this does the first time through, so we can exit. All right, so we should have Ashley and value, and min value is 500. Okay, so now this should update on this iteration. So our min key should be Ashley. Our min value should be 2. Yes. And then we have a new key and a new value, which should also update. It should break out of the loop. Yeah, it'll break out of the loop this time. No. Is there another? Like, oh, we're in the next test. That's why. Yeah, no key here. All right. Exit. All right. So that spec. So that satisfies this lab. Questions? Does this make sense? What stumbling blocks did you guys come across? I know it can be made to look easy when I'm sitting here going through it. And I'm sure I know this is not this easy when it's being gone through. This is also one that a lot of people stumble on. So I've done study groups on it multiple times. So it's kind of hard to remember what was, kind of so difficult about it. I know it's difficult. I've just done it many times at this point. So yeah, questions, comments, anything. If not on this, on something else, because yeah, we got time. If we were to refactor this down, because lines 13 and 14 and 16 and 17 are the same, we could change this and get rid of this else if. And do or. Yeah, like this. The order of this shouldn't, let me think, shouldn't matter in this instance. Sometimes which one you have first does matter. Well, not with an or statement. With an and statement, it would. With an or statement, no, it doesn't matter the order. So yeah, it could be either or. We could switch them, but that should still work. Yes. Yeah. I'm sitting there thinking, I know you guys know how to talk because we get on screen shares. Does this make sense? Oh, you're welcome, Josh. Yeah. I don't think there's a way to use and in this. Because I can't think of a second condition that we are trying to fulfill. Because when you use and, you have to have two things that are true at the same time. And I can't think of where that would occur here. I could be wrong though. If somebody can think of it, let me know. I'd love to write the code and figure it out. Oh, or maybe you're asking just in general using and. I think and is more obvious because it's when you need multiple things. It would. So and would be something like where it would be apparent, like this or became apparent because we were using the same code twice in an if else. So it was like, if this is true, or if this is true, do things. So this would be kind of like, if this is true. So if this is true, we're going to execute this block. And then if we had like another nested if inside of here. So if this is also true, run this code. So this is where we would see, okay, like both of these things need to be true to run this code. So let's just throw that up here with an and. And then we can get rid of this and get rid of this and just, still run this code for both of them. If we were doing something inside of this though, that would throw a wrench into that plan. Maybe, depending on how it was actually structured and what it was. Name equals something. Do camel case just to, because you're not supposed to. In Ruby. Yeah, so something like that. And they're really just patterns that you start to notice. And if you break out of reading the code or out of writing the code and looking at the code and just talk about what you want it to do, if we're walking through this, we're going to say, if this is true, if y equals 10, naturally, I think I would look at it and say, and if blah, blah, blah is true, then we're going to do this. And I say, oh, well, I said the word and, so can I use the operator? I think I've also trained my brain to do that somewhat. So it comes in time. Yeah, I could see that. Thinking about kind of how to do this, because I think when you think back a little bit, it's like, and you think back to arrays, it was like almost a go-to. Like, okay, I set an empty variable, I fill it with stuff, and then I return it. It was kind of a pattern for a while. And then we kind of just forget about it as we keep moving and don't see how, the same sort of patterns occur over and over and over again in code, just a little bit differently. A lot of stuff is very similar. Yeah, any other questions or thoughts? Yeah, a lot of times it's just going back and reviewing, seeing things again. Things reoccur. You just don't realize it, I guess. And there's probably an even more concise way to do this. But I think this is kind of the clearest way to set it up and do it. Yeah, I'm thinking. I'm gonna see. I think I remember helping somebody the other day using there's something that I don't remember what it is though. It's not all. Let's see. New, try, convert, any association clear, compare, default, delete, dig, each, empty. Length, member, merge, eject, replace, select, shift, store, update values. Yeah, it's a lot of it's real consistent across how things work. There is a method that provides an accumulator. You can compare against it. Oh well, we'll figure it out. Yeah, most of the things are available. And then if they're not, Ruby's pretty easy to, dot to underscore a, and now you have an array, or toString, or 2s to convert values and play with them, and then you can reconvert them back, and yeah, you got what you need. Any other questions? Oh, I wrote this down because we had a meeting for us who host study groups. I should be introducing myself and who I am. I'm Seth. I run some study groups here and do technical coaching. I graduated from the program in July. I got a job in August. I worked for a startup for a little over 3 months. Startup didn't get its next round of funding, and they let everybody go except for like 3 people. And yeah, looking for a job again. But actually, I'm not looking for a job again. I accepted another offer yesterday, which was, how long would that be? Wednesday? Less than 3 weeks after I finished at the first company. So yeah, it's good times. That's kind of the quick summary of who I am. If you haven't been on one of my study groups before. The first detail I looked to, I guess I kind of looked at an overview of the whole problem, kind of that 30,000 foot view. The limiting view of not using these methods really made me start thinking, okay, how can I do these things? And I looked at what these methods do, and it's like, okay, I have to replicate some of this functionality from scratch. So ultimately, I think I just looked back for a little while and thought and said, okay, if I need to know a minimum value then I have to go through all the values. So I know I'm going to need an iterator of some sort to go through all the values. And then I'm going to have to compare the values because I only need one. And I have to check to see which one is lowest. And I'm looking at the values, but I also need the keys because I need to return the key. If it's fuzzy, but if I remember when I went through this, I think I created it the first time and I didn't have a key. I returned the value and I was like, but this is the minimum value. This is what we're looking at. This is what we're comparing. And it's like, oh, but we only need we need the key, not the value. In the spec, for this lab, I'm just looking at what the example is to kind of try and see what the data is going to be used. So I'm like, okay, these are all integers. So I know I can compare them with, operators that are compared with integers. These are all integers in both hashes. So I'm looking at data types typically. Because that's really where I know what methods I can use on something. So I know that, I know that I have a hash full of symbols and integers. So that my keys and my values, I can treat them as such. And really just, the tests, the specs are what they are. It takes a little bit of time to get used to reading them. But really I'm looking at the info that is eventually going to come through the function or the method. So like with something like this, I'm not worrying too much about like the words, although they're very verbose and helpful, but I'm looking at, okay, this hash is and then it's going to be, this hash is going to be passed in to my method, key from in values is getting this hash. So I said, okay, I know the data that I have to work with. And you can also do that just by throwing a pry, like right at the top of the method and seeing what goes through. But being able to compare those, this one's pretty straightforward, where everything's almost the same except for passing an empty hash. But sometimes it'll be generating random data, or it'll have 5 different types of things. So this hash, in this spec, this hash could actually be defined like as a before each up here, and cut some words out of this spec, some lines out of this spec. But yeah, it takes some time to really get the abstraction of the tests. But really I look for where the function is called or where the method is called. It's like this line, and this line, 8 and 16, because that's going to tell me or 2 things. So where it's called, so here's where it's called with a hash, and then what it's looking for on the back side. So typically a 2 equals or contains or whatever it may be. And like, okay, Blake. So I know what's going in and what it's expecting to come out the back side. And typically how it's expecting it. So, Blake, it's not looking for a puts in this instance, it's looking for a return. But yeah, kind of just connecting the dots of what's actually going on in the test, what's being passed in and how it's being called. Because that's really where you can get the abstraction where, or you can even think about it and say, oh, so this is what's being passed in. So I can throw this in here. And if that's what's being passed in, and that's actually what that is too. Okay, does this make sense now, the way I'm doing this? You can actually go through and replace all those arguments and look at it and say, okay, is this I think this will work. Can I call each on a hash? Is this the right setup for the block? I think a lot of the testing does for us because, it's going to throw an error if we do the wrong things, and it's going to tell us typically, no method error or type error or type mismatch or whatever the errors say. So I don't know that you have to do that much, but it could help with, visualizing because, these things are placeholders. So like something like this, it could just be X. And it'll work just the same. We could do the same like with all of these things. They're just abstractions. Or I guess that needs to stay key. It didn't work. Value, just be. That'll work, P, except for the method. So if you write stuff like this, we're like, this is way too abstract. Yeah, still doing exactly the same thing. So plugging in things more verbosely is something that I like to do, or at least look at. I'm pretty good at visualizing things that aren't there, or like inputting that hash into this spot and watching it trickle down through the function. But not everybody's like that, and I wouldn't expect everybody to be. And yeah, stuff like this makes it just way harder to read and understand. And that's typically why we don't do it, because in the end, Ruby's going to take it and do something to it. And this is probably going to end up being the same exact code as all those extra letters that were there before that made it easy for us humans to read. Like this. It'll probably be exactly the same thing in the end when it gets down to machine code or whatever it's called. Cool. Anything else? I like that people are here and we're chatting. I wouldn't worry about, the elegance. I have this discussion, I think, pretty often with people in study groups. It's a common question. I think that, let me see if I can find something. I'll probably have to, it may use, I can't remember if this uses, what this uses to log in. Log in. Sweet, GitHub. I hopefully signed up with GitHub. Cool. If I can find stuff. Because they won't show you answers unless you've solved it. So let me find something that... So this is Code Wars. This is like a algorithm site that you can go at, and it uses all this gamification to make people want to use it all the time. Completed. Sweet. 6. Can't remember. Yeah, they get the lower numbers are harder. So let me see if I can figure out how to get to my solution. So like, we look at code and don't worry about the actual code. Like, this is a lot of stuff. Like, this is how I solved this thing. It was like, what? I don't know. I bet I could probably edit it and see how many lines it is, but this is what, like 50, 75, something like that? 60, maybe? I don't know. And then you look at all solutions, and it's like you have this best practices tab, and it's like this. And you're like, what? And then you're like, and this just like repeats over and over and over again. Like, and you're like, well, that has to be better. It's upvoted. It's considered, it's called best practice. It's this, that, the other thing. And then I think this one's even bigger. Solutions. My solutions. Or maybe, I think, no, that's the one we were just looking at. Either way. However, this type of code, while it's really, really like short comparatively, it's like impossible to understand, even for people who are really, really good at this stuff. Like, it's compact and like they're calling map on a split with a arrow function to replace with a regex with another function inside of that with the return that's being sorted with a key value pair. Like it's arguable that this is better, I guess some people say, because less characters or whatever. But I think in the grand scheme of what people are doing, this is seen as not maintainable. I guess maintainable is a good word, because somebody's going to write this and it's going to work, and then 6 months later they're not going to work there anymore, or they're going to move on, or it's going to be 2 years or whatever, and somebody else is going to come along who didn't write this and doesn't know what's going on, and they're going to want to improve it or add a feature, and they're going to look at it and it's going to take them hours to figure out what's going on, when like, yeah, my code might be like 3 times as long, and I guess I still have testing stuff in here, like these console logs could go, but it's like, it's commented like split initial string into each team's times, so it's like, okay, that's what's going on here. Convert times into total seconds, okay, that's what's going on here. Calculate range, okay, calculate average, calculate median, like, and I'm sure I can do these things better, but it's like, okay, I understand everything that's going on and I can read it, and ultimately it sometimes does, sometimes doesn't. Typically, I found that, and there's another one of these sites, this site is just, does it work? So it doesn't matter about performance. There's another one called, what, Code Fights, if I remember right. If it'll load. Am I blocking some scripts that are supposed to be running? If I remember right, Code Fights actually looks at the performance of your code. It's more targeted towards like those computer science algorithm questions that are sometimes given on interviews. I've never gotten one. I can legitimately say that, you know, in my four real life technical interviews, I've never been asked like to implement bubble sorts from scratch or something like that. All right, this site's not loading for some reason. But what's happening when you do something like dot sort, it's not magic. The sort is actually doing a comparison for loop. Like, I don't know if I sort in here, but like it's doing some sort of loop. Like this is a while loop. This while loop, or so either way, you sometimes will lose some of your performance because of conciseness, because now you're calling a method that's going to run a loop when you could have just run that loop. So you're adding an extra call, and that's interpretation that has to happen in the code, and you lose some stuff to that. So it isn't always the more concise, the faster it is. It could be that the longer stuff works better. Like all of these math.floors, I mean, they're not magic. I'm calling math, which is part of JavaScript, and using some sort of function inside of math. It's going into the math, and then it's finding floor, and then it's using floor on this. And I can probably write a helper function that does this specific thing that's more that's maybe not more concise, but it's more targeted to this one specific case. So we don't have to bring in this math and everything that comes along with it, because math isn't just this dot floor. It's also, I think it's max, it's min, it's, I forgot I have this. It's max and it's min. When I hit control, this thing, it shows where it's at. It's all types of different things. So when you called something like dot floor, which is just rounding down for you, ultimately, that costs you something. Whereas, I bet I could just write something that gets rid of anything past the decimal point, although that might not do exactly. Either way, yeah, you can. It's not always faster. A lot of times it's actually slower, but sometimes it's not, because sometimes the person who's written something like math.floor is way, way smarter than I am, or I won't say you guys are, because I don't know all you guys personally, but these are the people that like write a programming language are usually pretty deep into it, and they want to make sure that these things perform well. So they've been through every way that you can round something down, and they've found the best way to do it. That's the most performant. And yeah, so you lose something, but sometimes you gain it back with the smartness of the person who implemented it, and sometimes you don't. So it's just one of those things. A phrase that I hear often in talks, going to meetups and going to conferences or just watching things online, is don't optimize early. So, it's kind of everybody's like, we need to optimize, we need to make things as fast as possible. But like, there's things when you get to React and stuff, like there's things that are implemented in React as they've been updating the library and stuff that like make things faster on like millisecond levels. And it's like, we just made something 5 milliseconds faster, but it was already so fast that the human eye couldn't detect a difference. So it's literally like, it's so fast that like we didn't need to optimize it anymore because we don't even notice it. Like a lot of things, this code versus the other code, like you're probably not even going to notice the difference, even if one is better or quote unquote worse or faster or not. A lot of us aren't going to work, at least in the beginning, on problems that are scoped large enough to be visibly different. We're not going to have hundreds of thousands or millions of concurrent users running the code, at one time. And it's going to be noticeably different if something isn't, a little bit quicker than, some other way. Yeah. Different logic across similar data sets or similar operations using different logic, depending on site and app needs. I think you start in the same place for everything. And it's really just, the red-green refactor that's talked about, make it work, and then you make it better, and then you make it, I think I added something to it and I wrote it down once. I was like, make it work, make it right, make it fast, make it pretty, make it fast again. As what I added to that red-green refactor, kind of saying, make it work, make it right, make it fast. And sometimes you don't get to make it fast because it's fast enough. Sometimes you don't get to make it right because, business necessities require that you move on. as long as there isn't security issues with it in production, then it doesn't always get to even to the past the red part of the refactor process. But yeah, I don't think different logic. I also don't have a large enough base of knowledge to even use different knowledge or different logic. So I don't know that I could even speak to that either, because I'm like, I only have a small amount of logic knowledge at this point in time anyway. Yeah, no problem. I really enjoy the kind of the backside of it. It's talking about, I love going through labs and lessons. Don't get me wrong, but I love also answering the more conceptual questions about life as a software developer with the minimal amount of knowledge that I have, but from observing. And I probably sit down with one senior developer a week for coffee, and to chat for an hour, just building my network and soaking up knowledge and wisdom. And yeah, this stuff is hard. Don't worry if you get stuck. It's everybody gets stuck. Cool. Well, it's 9 o'clock. That's the hour. I have another study group that's starting right now. I don't know if anyone's here for it yet. It's an office hours. If you're here for Rails, cool. Kip, message me somewhere. Slack, I guess. And I'll see about getting you this somehow once I figure out where it's actually being saved to, because it's saving in the cloud in Zoom. All right, let me stop this screen share for now.